you always want it to go longer. Um, it was good to be at home. We always get a lift from our fans here, and particularly tonight, the way we started the game. Um, I thought it was impactful for us because we found more energy, we found more juice. Um, this year has been full of a lot of things. Um, we'll go through them all, whether it's just adversity in many different shapes and sizes, which is typical of an NBA season and typical of life. Um, but I thought the way that this group handled those things, over a period of 80 plus games, is something that's commendable. Also felt like our team, both individually and collectively, guys just kept grinding. We weren't perfect. We didn't play well all the time, but there was a commitment from guys individually to improve. And I think you saw that take place over the course of the year, no matter who joined us, who was in, who was out. There was a mindset that was about us getting better. So to have a team compete the way they did tonight and understand that we want to keep getting better, and you take all these things with it. Uh, really have a whole lot to say about what next. Just trying to absorb this, but I did want to, really articulate specifically how proud I am of this group and the way that they've stuck together and the way that they've competed throughout the entire year. And obviously, tonight being, um, in a lot of ways, with the exception of the result, I thought the way the game went and the way our guys battled and competed was something I'm proud of.
Coach, you talk about some of the guys coming in late, but George and Karis, they were truly some spark plugs coming off of the bench in that first half. Just how were they able to kind of keep guys' head in the right direction and kind of fuel some of that comeback?
Well, from a coaching standpoint, when you have you know various guys on the roster that always bring different things, sometimes it's hard to give people enough opportunity on the court to be able to do those things. And some of those guys, whether it be Mo or George or Terrence, Karras, the guys that you mentioned, uh, for them to come in and do what they did in a short period of time, and as you said, tonight all of them contributed in unique ways and to kind of their unique skill sets, and some of those skill sets being what they're doing on the floor from a basketball standpoint, but a lot of it, I think, the competitiveness and the maturity that those guys have is something, that you could feel them kind of infusing that into some of the younger guys, and they take that seriously. I think there's a whole lot of pride, and that's something that is appreciated all the way around, and you appreciate it from those guys. They're guys you respect.
Coach, what was in your opinion, the major difference in overtime?
I'm sorry.
What was the major difference in overtime? What you saw?
I'd have to go back and watch. Anytime you have a 5 minute stretch, you want to watch it and look at it play by play. Um, they were able to, were they 5 for 6 from three in overtime? I think that's hard to overcome. And to whatever extent, we had some breakdowns that resulted in those threes being more open than we wanted to. Um, you're always going to look back and wish that were different, but give Miami credit. You know, thought both teams played at a high level and a very high level competitively, and they were able to make those plays. We made a lot of those plays ourselves. We didn't make them during that 5 minute stretch, and we've got to live the off season with that. But I'm not going to look at 5 minutes. I will look at the 5 minutes, obviously, because it's high score when we started. But my focus is a little broader than that right now, and that should be clear about what I just articulated for the last 5 minutes.
Which there's probably a few sore bodies in the locker room today. It felt like a lot of guys hit the floor chasing those balls, trying to catch opportunity they could. Does it get anything, or like some solace out of the fact that it was the last game, but everyone left it all out on the floor?
Yes, win or lose, you want that in every game really, but there's some games obviously that are more important than others in that sense. So again, to see the way that we competed, um, we didn't make every play that we wanted to make, but the effort was tremendous.
The Hawks stayed in the game for the first 3 quarters, and then coming to the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, it feels like they were energized, the defense was clicking, and you made a huge run led primarily by the defense. What did you see out of that moment, and what will you carry over to next season from what you saw in that moment?
Yeah, I think that's you kind of hit a couple bookends on. I think every team is different. Every team plays slightly different style. Different schemes, tactics, whatever it is that usually fit their personnel. And in our case, um, being able to get stops is really important because it allows us to try to get out and run. And when that didn't happen early, and oftentimes it doesn't happen, as much as you want. I think the perseverance that you have to have during those stretches is really important in order to come back, particularly when a team is making shots, making some tough shots. You can't let those things deflate you. And we talk about that, as being competitive endurance, um, and just trying to compete on every play throughout the course of the game. And I think that's what we saw from those guys. Um, defensively, we have to be unbelievably dialed in. From a personnel standpoint, there's a certain way we have to play defense, just like there's a certain way we have to play offense. And every year is a little bit different, but I think maybe the biggest thing for me um, is the way we passed the ball. The way that we shared, and that's something that's kind of unique into itself. That a team that kind of has that trust in one another is a team that can continue to build. And we've got some young guys that are, and older guys that they're hurting right now, and that's a good thing. You want to feel that as much as anything because it's just indicative of how much you care. I think that's what everybody could feel tonight.
Coach, I know you guys played 50 minutes tonight, but he's one of those young guys. What has it been like watching him grow into the player that he is that allows you to trust him to take on such responsibility?
Yeah, I've been up here a number of times and we're trying to figure out why did you play this guy, why did you play that guy, what's going on with this, and as I've said before, there's never real right answers. You judge those based on the results. In this case, it was clear that Onyeka needed to match up with Bam, and we wanted to use our timeouts in order to rest him as opposed to getting him out of the game, even if it's for a minute or two. Because sometimes, without using a timeout, you have somebody sitting at the scores table for a while. So that was something that was clear, really early in the game that we wanted that matchup. And then obviously the way that he played in addition to that certainly was affirming. And I have first of all, he's a player that I really appreciate having a chance to coach because there's a glow to him that just elevates people. He's one of those guys that he's a great teammate. And, to see him with the level of focus, uh, in this second half of the season where he's earned, I think that's important, that he's earned, more opportunities as he did tonight. And he's one of the guys that, I feel can continue to get better. And you can see his confidence growing. There's certain aspects of the game that he may not have even been as aware of, that he's thrown himself into everything. And sometimes when he's smiling, the wheels are turning. He's looking for every way he can to get better. And that includes a lot of the mental parts of the game and his position, because he's in a lot of different coverages. We're asking him to do a lot of different things. and he's so instinctive. And I think one of the best things is that, being more precise, um, being more focused. He hasn't lost his instincts, and that's, he's got great instincts for the game.
Coach, you said there that a lot of the guys are hurting, and it's natural after.
Sure, yeah.
What's your message to the team after?
Yeah, I'll step back away from that. It's similar to what we've been discussing. That maybe the biggest thing. This isn't really a great time to try to digest and analyze a game as much as it is to appreciate, to have gratitude for the guys that you're able to coach. And being part of a team is a special thing. Anybody that's had that experience, there's different types of teams, whether it's a family or whatever, and you share in success and you share in nights like tonight. And that to me is a big part of why I do this. And there's a team that feels that right now, and that's a team that has a chance to get better together.
Thank you, Coach.
Okay. Yep.